Chocolate is scrumptious when it crunches. That's why I love Nestle Crunch. Chocolate is scrumptious when it crunches. That's why I love Nestle Crunch.
The blend of Nestle's creamy milk chocolate with crunchies tastes just as good as it sounds.
Chocolate is scrumptious when it crunches. That's why I love Nestle Crunch.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Blair, or the Illuminati, and today we're going to be talking about one of the largest food companies in the entire world. The behemoth, gigantic company we all know and we've all heard of, Nestle. Just because they're known for Kit Kats, chocolates, and other treats doesn't mean this company is super sweet. Sorry, I had to make the pun, but now it's out of my system. Anyway, Nestle has seen its fair share of criticisms and boycotts throughout the many years of its existence. Even though I've heard some bad things and known in general to kind of avoid them, it's really not easy to do so because of how big they are, and it's most certainly not easy to get all the dirty details of what they've done. So today, we're going to dive into those very details and take a look at what's gotten people so angry at Nestle over the many, many years they've been around. Nestle was founded in 1866. Originally, the company only sold infant cereal, but quickly diversified into other products that we see today. Chocolates, soup, yogurt, frozen foods, etc. Back in the 1800s, they were the first condensed milk factory in Europe, operating out of Cham, Switzerland. The founder, Henry Nestle, was trained in science and chemistry. According to Cleverism.com, he experimented with everything from food to cement, and in 1867, Henry Nestle produced a nutritious combination of milk, wheat, and sugar. He called it iilluminaughtii. It was so nutritious that it saved the life of a child. The reason for this is because the child in question was a premature infant who couldn't tolerate his mother's milk or any of the usual substitutes, and was able to survive off of this formula. And honestly, that's a really impressive claim to fame there, and I'm not gonna knock that. That's awesome. Their formula must have had some merit if this iilluminaughtii actually worked. However, unfortunately for Nestle, their company plummeted during World War II. In the 1920s, they saw their first expansion, and then the 30s saw their profits fall from 20 million to 6 million. The war did help them introduce a new product though, Nescafe, a staple drink in the US military. This was called Nestle's Coffee, and it helped the company stay afloat during war times. I know this might sound like Nestle was taking advantage of the war for profit, but adapting during difficult times isn't bad in my book, so long as they weren't pushing it on people or cutting costs to make a badly made product either. Considering that they were expanding in so many other avenues too, this doesn't sound far off from what they would have made anyway. It was after the war times that Nestle truly began to take off. From Maggie and Cross to Blackwell to Findus, Libby's and Stouffer's, Nestle began acquiring companies left and right and showed no signs of slowing down. They even bought Roundtree, a candy company, in 1988, which led to Kit Kats and Smarties. This research is about to ruin Kit Kats for me, I know it, I love them, this is gonna suck, but whatever, let's keep going. Anyway, in the 90s and early 2000s, it was San Pellegrino, Spiller's Pet Foods, and Ice Cream Dryers, Chef's America, the maker of Hot Pockets, and they even bid on Hershey's, although that deal fell through. Ovaltine, Gerber, and then in the 2010s it was Kraft and the weight loss program Jenny Craig. They dove into pharmaceutical products, dermatology research centers, and partnered with the Global Coalition on Aging, a consortium that includes companies such as Intel and Bank of America. They struck up a deal with Starbucks, later sold Gerber Life Insurance, and the money just kept adding up and up and up. I seriously can't overstate how much money this company makes and how many buyouts they've done. It's one of those stupid money situations where the billions and millions all just sort of blend together and you're left unable to even imagine how much money that is. You just know it's a ton of money. Now, the problem with gigantic companies like this is how things can slip through the cracks. When you're the largest food company in the world, it's hard to be kept accountable. 1 million people boycotting Nestle won't break them, and they've got enough money to sweep just about anything under the rug. So now that we've got a sense for just how giant this company is, let's take a look at the equally giant problems they're hiding. The first controversy came in the 70s as expected, honestly. I'm not trying to bash large companies, but I've noticed a pattern in where they start to lose sight of their initial mission when the money starts rolling in. Greed is pretty powerful, and Nestle himself, their founder, wasn't around to keep the original mission alive. This doesn't mean that every single person who works for Nestle is money hungry, but it is worth noting every time we see a company really starting to grow, take off, acquire others, etc., that is also around the time they start to get sloppy and careless. For Nestle, that was how they handled their lacti, or baby formula. When it was first founded, their breast milk substitute gave Nestle initial success. It was their claim to fame and a seemingly genuine product. However, nearly 100 years later, this product wasn't advertised as a nutritious alternative. Instead, Nestle began discouraging new mothers from breastfeeding altogether. Now, I know there may be amazing alternatives and substitutes out there. I'm personally not a mother, so for me, this isn't really something that's personally high on my agenda of things I look at. So this was a little harder for me since it's not something I really look at. But if a mother chooses to use them, maybe she has lactation problems, or maybe it's her choice, but it's not up to the breast milk substitution company to try and make that choice for her. If you advertise as a healthy alternative, fine, but to actually discourage mothers from a natural and obviously less expensive option, that's kind of gross. Nestle is in no place to give such personal, medical advice or dictate how a mother should feed their newborn. This advertising was taken way, way too far. Mothers were rightfully pissed off at Nestle too, and the boycott began. From 1977 to 1984, one group called the Infant Formula Action Coalition boycotted their products. It ended because, according to Nestle themselves, they refined their marketing tactics to follow the new World Health Organization, the WHO, recommendations to regulate the marketing of breast milk substitutes. To Nestle's credit, they do have this information on their website as well, admitting that they changed their policy and acknowledging the boycott existed in the first place. And that is definitely something to give a company credit for. So I'll try to find the positive when it does exist, and that is most certainly a positive, that they acknowledge, hey, we messed up, this is a notation saying we recognize this happened and we tried to change this and do better. It's better than denying the problems, obviously, which many companies, especially MLMs, are notorious for, so I can give Nestle props for this. Unfortunately, Nestle doesn't seem to have changed that much at all. They knew their marketing tactics had created issues before, but in 1988, more organizations in the UK launched boycotts. A report by the Changing Markets Foundation released in 2018 gave more detail to the topic, including investigations in recent years. This report investigates the general nutrition and health claims on infant milk products for babies under 12 months old sold by the market leader Nestle. The investigation revealed many cases of inconsistent behavior across 70 products sold in 40 countries. Some of its products were found to be marketed as better for babies' growth for not having certain types of sugar and artificial flavorings, yet many of their other products in mainland China, Hong Kong, and South Africa were found to contain these ingredients. In other cases, many of Nestle's products were found to be carrying claims of questionable credibility, including products to be modeled after breast milk in the US, Switzerland, Spain, and Hong Kong, yet having different nutritional compositions. Furthermore, products sold in various American and Asian countries carry health claims that are not authorized in Europe because of insufficient scientific evidence, and even in European countries, Nestle sells products marketed for hungry babies and constipation relief, although these claims have not been authorized by the EU law. The report concludes by calling on Nestle's aspiration to be the world's leading nutrition, health, and wellness company by conducting an independent review of its product range at a global level to ensure only products with composition based on best science are sold. In addition, the company should ensure that it respects the WHO Code of Marketing and Breast Milk Substitutes and subsequent World Health Assembly resolutions. The full reports are on the Changing Markets Foundation's website, and it's pretty telling. 17 pages detailing their marketing tactics, nutritional claims, and, as the report puts it, the lack of clear rationale behind them. This became a long-standing issue though. The company apparently used these same exact sales tactics in Pakistan. I guess what they say on their website about striving to improve on their FAQ page is kind of a lie. It's not as if they don't know what they're doing. They've done this before. And unfortunately, in other countries that may not be as developed as the US or the UK, accurate medical information may not be as readily available. But this just keeps going. In 2009, the LA Times published an article about Ernest Leffender, who passed away at that time. Apparently, Nestle paid off his Ethics and Public Policy Center. They gave him $25,000 and the center, which had been sponsoring a study into the medical needs of development but never released the results. There's no definitive proof that Nestle is the reason why, but the author, a reporter at Fortune magazine, wrote an article heavily favoring the Nestle company's perspective on the topic. And Leffender's center just so happened to reprint the article. Whether it's coincidence that it's an ethics and public policy center sided with Nestle after the past, or that they were paid off, you can make up your mind, but it sure sounds fishy to me. More complaints came in even as early as 2011. And I know 9 years sounds like a long time ago, but again, remember, this is a company that has had these complaints for 50 years and is yet to completely eradicate them. Not to mention that insisting on breast milk and bottle feeding in some of these countries where they advertise is more harm than good. Not necessarily because there's anything wrong with the alternatives themselves, but Nestle isn't taking the country's environment into account. ZME Science says the following. It's been known for quite a while that bottle feeding infants in an impoverished tropical environment with limited sanitation and refrigeration can be a recipe for disaster. But Nestle's asked that critics should focus on doing something to improve unsafe water supplies, which contributed to health problems associated with bottle feeding. Today, several countries and organizations are still boycotting Nestle despite their claims to be in compliance with WHO regulations. There's even a committee, the International Nestle Boycott Committee, that monitors their practices. Several universities and student organizations have also joined the boycott, especially in the UK. More recently, the company has also been underhead for a study on breast milk substitutes in India. India's Apex Medical Research Authority asked the company to stop paying study participants, which included pregnant and breastfeeding mothers. So how low can you stoop? India has asked Nestle, hey, can you maybe stop bribing our participants when they're trying to conduct studies over breast milk? And this article was published this year, so these problems are in fact still happening today. We can't know for sure how many young lives have been lost because of this marketing campaign, and Nestle, of course, won't take responsibility for their actions here. This proves, if anything, how harmful aggressive marketing can be. We all know what a harmful product can do, but even a good product can do damage if it's shoved down someone's throat. Now look, I don't want to be one of those people that goes around shouting, "Think of the children," because of poor marketing, but these are babies. Obviously, you're gonna want to be exceedingly careful when it comes to infants, right? Well, it gets so much worse than marketing, but we'll get there. Just remember that they were warned multiple times. The next thing we need to talk about is child labor. In 2016, Fortune reported that over 2 million West African children still do the dangerous and physically taxing work of harvesting cocoa. Nestle isn't the only company that benefits off of child labor. Hershey and Mars are also guilty of it, according to the Washington Post. But even last year, Nestle could not guarantee that their chocolates didn't use child labor. Their own website darts around the question, saying that many of our suppliers live and work in communities where children have traditionally worked on family farms for historic and economic reasons, and that if we do receive reports of child labor, we will investigate allegations relating to specific suppliers and take strong action if there is evidence of wrongdoing. So, is that a "we don't use child labor anymore"? No, absolutely not. It's an excellent way of dodging the question, and I'll give them that. But in my opinion, you cannot be a moral company with the slogan "good food, good life" and rely on the labor of a child. In the 2010 documentary The Dark Side of Chocolate, you can see how horrific the slave trading and exploitation of African children really is in order to gather cocoa. Again, I don't want to say that this is only Nestle, but their company is on the top of the documentary's list of those that benefit from child trafficking and slavery in Africa. Guys, I like chocolate just as much as anyone else. Boycotting all these large chocolate producers is difficult, especially when it felt like every company at the start of the documentary said their cocoa came from the Ivory Coast in Africa. It's sort of a known but ignored problem, like knowing where hot dogs come from, but you don't want to hear that at a barbecue. There's plenty of evidence, but people, again, would rather stick their heads in the sand, especially when ethically sourced, smaller companies are far, far more expensive. The list of companies that have gone beyond to stand with slave-free chocolate and sponsored a social media outreach is only 18 companies, and that's 18 worldwide. Companies that are ethically sourced, though not outspoken, are less than 150, and again, that's worldwide, by slave-free chocolates numbers. There's over 500 chocolate companies in the United States alone, for reference. After explaining the scale of the problem, the documentary goes on to show the situation in trafficking. One 12-year-old girl traveled over 275 miles by train alone to try and earn money for her family. Groups of children were transported across the border, and one boy is seen crying after being smuggled by bus. These are kids, not even teenagers. I feel like I have to emphasize that these are young children. Researching this, the documentary says, is so dangerous that investigators have actually been kidnapped as well and have never been found. It's not just CEOs in the US that want to deny the truth of the problem, though. Even men living in Africa with smuggled children right under their nose say that they aren't benefiting from trafficking. One man, one of the world's largest cocoa exporters, is shown saying that no children work in the cocoa plantations, and it would be a disaster if people stopped buying their cocoa. He says, get proof, even though we literally just saw the documentary recording the child trafficking that this man says doesn't even exist. Seems like the children are the only ones not in denial, seriously. Even those that are trying to help the situation say that it's not a problem and we're handling it, and that since the documentary crew was there in July, the trafficking they witnessed wasn't for cocoa because the crop isn't ready till October. He even insults their intelligence, honestly, and says that it must be that children are coming for vacation and says, we've got the law, it's against the law. Yeah, dealing drugs is against the law, but are you going to tell me that that doesn't happen? Murder is against the law. Does that mean no one is murdering anybody? The argument it can't be happening because it's against the law has got to be one of the weakest and most pathetic ones I've ever heard. Immediately after the meeting, they go to a random plantation nearby, and gee, what would you see here? There's 4 children between the ages of 10 and 12 there. They aren't in school, they can't speak the local language, and no, they aren't on vacation. They meet more plantation workers, more children. Don't get me wrong, there are people trying to save and rescue these kids, and Interpol has apprehended traffickers and saved dozens of them. The scale of the problem is obvious. Nestle has several hundred employees there, as well as other manufacturers, but they're not pretending it doesn't exist. They're just fighting it. Of course, they don't say how, though. The documentary specifically calls out Nestle at the end and pulls an absolutely badass, impressive move, showing their film right across from Nestle's headquarters. And this is just great, forcing them to see what they're actually responsible for. The sad reality is that some of your favorite chocolates have probably been made using child labor. Just based on the odds alone, it's a fact we have to come to terms with. I'm not saying never eat chocolate again until this problem goes away. I understand that's probably unrealistic, but it's worth knowing. And for those of you that can, it's worth trying to support those few ethical, child labor-free companies and promote their values. What a surprise it is, though, that they've got these problems in Africa when they've mistreated other countries for years too. There's not as much widespread information about Nestle in Colombia, but plenty enough that it's worth mentioning and speaking out on. After all, it's not about any one thing, but the pervasive extent of their corruption. Globalpolicy.org details the damage they've done in Colombia, stating the following. The Colombian Food Workers Union reports widespread practices and policies contradicting Nestle's claim to fully support and ensure labor and human rights. Ever since Nestle arrived in Colombia 50 years ago, the workers have battled to form a union. Since the Dirty War erupted in Colombia in the early 1980s, trade unionists have been on the front line of targeted but unofficial repression. Sinaltrainal was formed as an industrial union in 1982. According to Sinaltrainal, 7 of its members working at Nestle have been assassinated since then. The principal perpetrators of such disappearances are the paramilitary death squads. Although there are certain separation between the agents of repression and official entities, the links are an open secret. Human Rights Watch reports that it was officers in the Colombian army who set up the AUC's Calima bloc, a new parliamentary front established to attack the social movement in towns in Valle de Cauca in 1999. So, did Nestle murder these people? I won't pretend to know for sure when no one else does, but were they murdered on behalf of Nestle? It absolutely seems that way. So Nestle was outraged and demanded an investigation, and resolved to punish the people responsible for murdering their workers fighting for the right to unionize, right? No, of course not. Instead, let me read to you part of an article of what really did happen and Nestle's action. Nestle has been active in Colombia since 1944, where it has grown to be one of the biggest purchasers of milk. The town of Valledupar is home to the Cicliac factory, a subsidy which buys up most of the milk in the region and is an important economic force. In the 1990s, Romero was one of the 191 employees at Cicliac. Nestle planned a joint venture with another company, and Romero became an active opponent of the move. Romero became one of the most important union activists in the region, said legal expert Claudia Müller-Hoff, who is working on the case for the ECCHR, European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights. Because of his active involvement, local paramilitaries often threatened to kill him. In the face of serious threats, Romero temporarily went into exile in Spain through an organized protection program. Once that expired, he returned to Colombia in 2005 and filed a complaint against the termination of his contract. At the same time, he prepared for a public witness hearing in Switzerland regarding working conditions at Nestle's Colombian subsidiary, Müller-Hoff said, but he was never able to testify. Shortly before the hearing, Romero was abducted by members of a paramilitary death squad and tortured to death. The paramilitaries were caught and sentenced by a Colombian court. In his verdict, the judge concluded it was impossible that the group acted on its own. The judge ordered the state prosecutor to investigate leading managers of Nestle Cicliac to clarify their likely involvement and/or planning of the murder of union leader Luciano Enrique Romero Molina. The Colombian prosecution has drawn out the investigation up to today. So far, Nestle has rejected all allegations of responsibility and fails to answer requests for an interview. Allegations about the company's operations up to 2005 evidently do not jibe with the positions Nestle has taken since then. An example is Nestle's 2008 sustainability report, which claims that every employee should have the opportunity to develop his potential in a safe and fair work environment where he is listened to, respected, and appreciated. The report describes employee safety as non-negotiable. A man has been murdered here, tortured to death, and Nestle did nothing. Even if they weren't 100% responsible for his death, they were responsible for his right to safety in the workplace. They say it themselves and call it non-negotiable. When something like this happens and Nestle does nothing, it makes you realize how hollow their words actually are. They aren't backing any of this up, they're letting people die, not changing the situation when they, of all companies, have the power to make a real difference here. But since it's easier to be in change and not allow union rights, I'd guess they'd rather do nothing. I could go on about how infuriating this is, but again, we're far from the end. There's still so much more I have to share. However, since this video is already getting pretty long, this is where we're going to have to end it for today. Don't worry though, part 2 is going to be up very soon within the next day or two, and believe me, Nestle hasn't exactly made any strides to improve either, so things are only getting worse from here, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime though, I want to thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Let me know your thoughts on what you've learned so far in the comment section down below. If you want to see any of my sources, you can always look in my description box and you're going to find a pastebin link that's going to contain every single source that I use for writing these videos in every single one of my videos. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. If you liked today's video, leave a like, share it to spread awareness, talk about it to your friends and family, discuss what's going on and what they don't want you to know about. So, thank you guys so much for making it to another video. If you want more content from me, links for everything are also in the description box. But for now, love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!